So you take into the noon hour to finish. Okay?
I was going to tell everyone I was going to finish in an hour to look at, but I know you gave me an hour time limit, so.
Okay. Another hour. Okay.
Okay. So I'm only going to be an hour. Appreciate your attention. And before I go back into question 3, death of someone doesn't ever go away. It reverberates throughout your entire life, and it's not something that you just, the next week you forget about it. It's something that never goes away. As I told you yesterday, death keeps no calendar. And it's not like opening an old wound, because the wound never goes away. And people's lives are turned upside down by death, especially unexpected death. And time does not heal all the wounds. And that's why there's an enormous loss in this case. So let's talk about number 3. Unfit or incompetent, knew or should have known. Mr. Putnam kept saying notice. That's not in the instruction. It's knew or should have known, unfit or incompetent, or incompetence created a particular risk to others. Number 1, unfit. Should have knew or known at any time, not when they hired them, at any time. They want to focus a little goes, Dr. Murray didn't even pay child support for all these children he had. He was morally unfit, and the conflict just came out even more and more. And the Los Angeles Police Department figured this out within 2 days of Mr. Jackson's death when they found the card in the contract. It didn't take them very long to be on this. 2 days. Now, let's talk about incompetency. Number 1, we know that Michael was having deteriorating health condition. That's all AEG's own emails. Numerous people were crying out about his condition. Hugdahl, Fay, Ortega, Sankey. A reasonable company, as Mr. Trell said, and all of a sudden he's taking a sharp deterioration or decline, as Mr. Phillips calls it, hasten his decline. Wouldn't you think that you got to look at what's going on, Doc? What's wrong? Why is this happening? You're going to get $150,000 a month. And why is Michael Jackson going downhill? That wasn't what we wanted you for. We wanted you to take care of him, not to make him worse. So let's look at this. Knew or should have known at any time from May 6th, May 8th to the day of his death. Now, let's talk about what Mr. Ortega said. Mr. Ortega, the reasonable person, suspected Murray was unfit. I asked him, did you have a concern about Murray as a doctor? I really didn't know what Murray did. But Michael showing up in that condition, I had a concern. Okay? Next. And you had a real concern about Dr. Murray at this time and his work as a professional for Michael. Answer, yes. So, come on. Of course he had a concern. Of course everyone had a concern, and I'm going to show you that. And then Mr. Trell told us that an independent contractor does something wrong, you can be sued. Yeah. If a lighting person you hired is an independent contractor does something wrong, there's a fire, someone gets hurt, you can be a defendant in law. Yeah, they know that. Come on. So, they had to have some idea. They all knew something was wrong. And then they want to give you the example. The plumber, the electrician, Dr. Murray. Okay? Well, let's look at that. If the plumber fixes a pipe and it breaks and a leak and there's a problem, are you responsible? If the electrician that you're hiring does a bad job and the house burns down, yeah. It's the same thing as the doctor. If he's doing a bad job, they say, oh, that's in the dark. That was the great explanation. Well, that's in the dark. It doesn't really look that bad. You heard Kenny Ortega, because I've never seen him like that. Horrible. Okay. Number 4. Unfitness, incompetence, harm. Well, the defendants didn't even dispute this one. Of course it did. The conflict, his unfitness, incompetence, he caused the death of Michael Jackson. No question. Now, substantial factor. They spent a lot of time on this, and their main argument was, we're just on the sidelines, We didn't know anything. We didn't know anything. Now, conflict of interest occurred because Dr. Murray's in dire financial straits. They're the ones that put the contract language together, not Dr. Murray. They're the ones that want to enter into a contract with Dr. Murray. Michael's health was seriously declining. No dispute. Although they want to dispute it, the evidence is contrary. They were pressure on Dr. Murray, and they were pushing back anyone that had a problem with Michael's health. Anyone that raised the problem, did they say, oh, thank you, Kenny. Let's meet and let's find out what's wrong with Michael. Did they do that? No. They call a meeting and they say, you stop it. You stop it. We're in charge. Mr. Phillips and Dr. Murray are in charge. You stop it. Substantial factor. Okay. It doesn't have to be the only cause. Think of it this way. You heard the instruction. There can be the more than one cause. Think of a bicycle built for two, and 2 people are pedaling the bicycle, like setting the concert up and do it. Both could be responsible. So it has to be a reasonable person would have considered to contribute the harm. It doesn't have to be the only harm, only cause. There can be multiple causes. Like Murray. Murray, obviously, in conjunction with being there, is a cause. But if Murray's not there, it doesn't happen. Now, they argue that it's not a substantial factor. The harm would have occurred without that conduct. So in other words, they're saying, well, if there's no Murray, no profile, then Michael's going to die anyway. Okay? That's what they're saying. But what evidence do they have of that? Let's look at it. Remember Dr. Matheson? They say, oh, it's a clever theory. Dr. Matheson, one of the leading medicine ethicists in the world, Stanford University has a great reputation, said, and it questions, is there an accepted set of criteria within your field to determine the severity of conflicts of interest? And this is at page 8624. He said, I think the one that's most widely accepted is the Institute of Medicine, was part of the federal government. Okay, that's a standard in the industry that does research and determines problems in the medical profession. Okay, so let's take that a little further. And Dr. Green agreed with the Institute of Medicine definition. A conflict of interest refers to a set of conditions in which professional judgment concerning a primary interest, such as the patient's welfare, is unduly influenced by the secondary interest, financial gain. Now, we all know that a doctor's not supposed to do things because of money. And we've heard the HMOs and all this issue, and the doctor can't get this and that. The doctor's duty is to the patient, number one. And most doctors in our society, they do a good job. They don't have a problem. But we don't. There's no doctors that have a contract. And this is the doctor. They say is competent and fit, shuts down his practice, all his patients in 10 days for money. You think, wow, this guy's allegedly making all this money, has all these practices, and for 150 grand a month, he's going to leave all his patients in 10 days? Come on. 10 days? Fully engaged in 10 days? Do you think, mate, wait, wow, I thought you were so successful you had all these patients. You can just leave everyone in 10 days? Would a fit and competent doctor dump everybody in 10 days for money? I don't think so. Now, let's go to the next one. Dr. Matheson testified, and this is page 8625, that this was the most severe conflict of interest he's ever seen or read about in any medical literature or study or all the cases that he's reviewed. The most severe conflict of interest he's ever seen. Think about it. A doctor leaves everything, and if the patient can't do what the person that you have the contract with, you're cut. And now you have nothing, and you got all this debt. And now what do? You do what's best for your financial condition. Just like AEG did what's best for them to make money. Now, let's continue on. Page 8603, Dr. Matheson. I want to direct your attention to the June time frame. Remember, you just can't look at it in little snippets. You've got to look at the whole picture, the coalesce of everything. Do you have an opinion in the June time frame as to whether the conflict of interest created by AEG likely led to Dr. Murray's substandard medical care? No question he gave substandard care, okay? Yes, I do. What is your opinion? My opinion is that the conflict of interest contributed in a very significant way to Dr. Murray's standard of care. Okay, one of the leading experts in the world came in here and testified, and he answered the questions. You know, that's the thing. You didn't see the judge have to say, answer the question, move the strike, answer the question. He answered the questions. They asked the question, he answered them. Okay? But then he goes on to say, my opinion is that the conflict contributed. Then he said, I think the way it happened was the conflict of interest was set up by AEG. The physical symptoms started to appear with Michael, documented, as Dr. Seisler said, better than any were pushed back. So it played out in late June, leading to Michael. Or is Kenny saying, have another doctor? Or as Mr. Bronca said, I know somebody to get in. And Mr. Phillips says, oh, no, not now's not a good time to introduce somebody else into the mix, because you can't imagine the consequences if we pull the plug now. Okay? Would a reasonable person say, whoa, time out? No. They would say, yes, time out. June 19th, Gongaware immediately writes back, we're going to remind Murray it's AEG, not MJ, who's paying his salary. Okay? The same day. So, instead of saying, how's Michael doing? What's wrong with Michael? Can we get help, Michael? Let's go see how's Michael doing. What did Dr. Murray say is wrong with him? No, he doesn't say anything. He doesn't care about Michael. He doesn't ask how's Michael doing. He says, remind Murray, we're paying, not MJ. Remind him what's expected of him. Okay? They want to control, keep going. Now on June 16th, remember on May 6th, he says done deal. May 8th, Willie sends all the terms to Murray. May 28th, Murray's saying, where's my money? Okay, we have an agreement. And all of a sudden, remember June 16th is the meeting, all of a sudden, after he says we want to stall Murray, they send him the written contract on June 16th, right when all this is going down within a day and a half. Is that a coincidence that all of a sudden, when Michael's not coming to practice, when he's saying to remind him, they immediately send the contract. Jory sends it to Woolley, who sends it to Murray. You think that's a coincidence? Then, that's Exhibit 266. Within 2 days of this problem developing, they don't say, well, call Dr. Murray, see how he's doing. They said, send him the contract that says you answer to the producer. Then on June 16th, they have the intervention meeting. That's their meeting. So in response to that, and who's at the meeting? Gongaware, Phillips, Murray, and Michael. Okay? Then what happens? June 19th, 3 days later, Michael's in bad shape, all the emails, trouble at the front, and doubt is pervasive. Everyone at AEG knew. Doubt is pervasive. It was sent to the highest level of the company. They knew there was a problem. Doubt is pervasive. That's Bugsy says that. Trouble at the front. Doubt is pervasive. Is that new or should have known? Okay, and go look at the whole picture now. Michael doesn't come on the 13th. 14th, they send the email, remind him, or Ortega tells him. Gongaware writes back to remind him who's paying him and what's expected. And within 2 days, they send him the contract. And 3 days later, Michael doesn't come to practice. I'm sorry, I always say practice rehearsal, but he doesn't come to practice. And doubt is pervasive. That means all around. Everyone knew. And remember, they can be negligent in supervising and retaining at any time. So do they go and find out what's wrong? No. What do? Well, there's a 25-minute phone call on the 20th between Phillips and Murray. Now, of course, Phillips testifies under oath that was 3 minutes or less, is only about scheduling. Well, then we get the phone records, shows 25 minutes. What do you think they were talking about during those 25 minutes? Because it wasn't about how Michael's doing, because Phillips never found out. And he told, I don't know. Then they have the meeting, and there's two different versions of the meeting. Remember? The meeting on the 20th, it's all rushed. They run over to Carol Wood, okay? Ortega says Murray's accusatory, threatening him, saying all these things, and he leaves in 15 to 20 minutes. And he basically says he's dismissed, I think is the word he used. And then I was dismissed from the meeting. Okay? Then Phillips says the meeting lasts an hour and a half, and everyone stayed together and left together. Why would he say that? Ortega said 15 to 20 minutes, and he was accusatory meeting, and Phillips says, it was great, everyone had a good time, it was a productive meeting, all this stuff. Remember his emails, on that date of the 20th, he lies about Murray to Ortega to silence him. We checked him out, he's successful, he doesn't need this gig, he's not unethical. Okay. Well, he certainly realized if somebody needed the gig, they could be unethical and do something. But he lied. So here's the exhibit we kind of copied a little bit, and I want to show what this timeline that Counsel for AEG went through yesterday. Okay, number one, they said, Murray prescribed medicine on January 25th, meaning he was in L.A. Well, he didn't move to L.A. These are Las Vegas records, and he called in cold medicine on January 25th, okay? That's the first fact. Second fact, they have a meeting with Dr. Adams, the Kevin Garnett lookalike, said that they never discussed propofol. They discussed narcotics, and he didn't want any. I never discussed propofol with Murray or Michael Jackson, okay? And, you know, as I said, propofol, maybe it's not the best idea, but if you have a competent doctor in the right setting, you're not going to die. Dr. Adams, if he was there, he wouldn't have died. He's competent. Number three, Mr. AEG Live said, oh, hey, Kai Chase saw Dr. Murray with oxygen bottles and everything, right, in April to prove that he was getting propofol. Well, she came back in June of 2009 and said Michael looked very different. He appeared weak, much thinner, undernourished, didn't look the well as he had in April. It was an obvious difference because we know that Murray didn't start the propofol until after that time, and I'll show you how. Number one, Kai said Murray wasn't around much in April. And they want to call Kai Chase a liar that was paid off by Mrs. Jackson. That's what they said yesterday. Kai Chase lie. She got paid off by Mrs. Jackson to come in here and lie. I mean, come on. I mean, what lengths will they go to trash everyone? Kai Chase, she's a nice person, okay? She tried to do the best she could. She was there trying to pull Paris down the stairs when she was trying to she had to grab her by the ankles, and Paris was screaming about her father when he died there at Carrollwood. Come on. She says, did you ever see his car present when you got there in April? No. Did you see oxygen tanks in the house in April? No, I did not. Did you make dinner for Dr. Murray in April? No. Did Murray take food upstairs in April? I didn't see Murray as much in April because he wasn't given propofol in April. Despite what they say, well, he ordered it, so he must have been given it. You know, he could have been doing this. He could have been off on the weekend. You know, there's no evidence of that. Let's look what the evidence is. He asked Cheryl and Lee on the 19th, and she said that Michael wanted to try these natural remedies for sleep. Can't remember the name of it now. Cocktail, was it? Myers? Sorry. Try not to think about cocktails. He didn't want to use any sleep prescriptions. When they talked about it, they had a plan. He wanted to go natural. Okay? So he's not getting propofol. But he can't sleep. He's desperate to sleep. So she set up the time with the injections. She saw his body. There's no IV marks of anything that she suspected. And from that time that she saw him, he was doing fine. And then we go to still on the 19th, no IV poles in the bedroom, no Diprovan boxes, no oxygen tanks, all on April 19th. Then the next day, well, it was actually the day before, Metzger says he went upstairs, then they said he didn't go upstairs, then he said he went on the landing. Bottom line is he didn't see any medical equipment there either. Doors were open. And they always want to put that lock on the door. That doesn't mean anything. They don't need to know that he's given propofol. They need to know, or should have known, that the risk of substandard medical care or bad medical care can occur. And it occurs because of the conflict. Again, there's no question, did AEG know that Michael was using propofol? That's not what you have to decide. Did they know or should they have known that Dr. Murray's unfitness and incompetence caused a particular risk? That's what they have to know. And the particular risk is the medical treatment. Now, late April, Gongaware says, first he tried to say it was at the dancers. Isn't that interesting how when they're questioning him, when I question him, he doesn't know anything. When they question him, he's like, oh, yeah, I remember. It was right after April 14th in the dancers, and that's when I talked to Murray, right? Come on. And then he says, well, it was 2 to 5 weeks before May 6th that he talked to Murray, not late April. And that's when they had the $5 million discussion. Now, who in their right mind is going to think it's no big deal? Some doctor is going to leave everything for a payment of $5 million. Okay? Now, let's look at the next one. Remember they went a big deal about these propofol orders, April, May, June. Okay? And there's records. But do you remember also that you just don't give propofol, you need to have lidocaine, right? Okay? And when was lidocaine ordered? Here's the exhibits. I can never read this. All right. Jeez. Oh my gosh. I don't know. Hell. What's the exhibit number? Help me. 4544. Something like that. Okay, May 12th and June 10th is when they ordered lidocaine. Right after May 6th and May 8th. Huh, surprise, surprise. They didn't bring that up, did they? Now, remember Detective Martinez said lidocaine's a local anesthetic. It burns, and when it's going in, it's used to reduce the burning sensation. They found it in Michael's room. It was the propofol given by Murray that caused the death with the lidocaine in Michael's room on June 25th, after they knew about all these problems. So we know that Michael wouldn't take it without it. Next thing we know, there's no evidence of any use of propofol before May 6th. Remember we made a big deal about when they made the contract? There's no evidence before May 6th. And if you go through an 8-week decline, it almost adds up perfectly to June 25th. Dr. Murray, remember, Dr. Seisler talked about an approximate 60-day of regime, and Dr. Brown from Harvard on the video said that they were trying to wean him off the propofol, and that's why he got the organic sleep. Remember, Kenny said, man, he looks so good, the organic sleep. And at the meeting, they told Kenny on June 20th, hey, oh, man, he's fine, he looks great. What does Kenny say? I was flabbergasted. There's no way he was like that, okay? So then what happens? Late April, he first talks to Murray. May 6th, they agree to the 150. They're getting ready to leave for London. His condition is steadily deteriorating. Kenny said he didn't think he was ready. That's 298. Any postponement causes Murray to lose 150 grand a month. Murray tells Kenny, stay in his lane, stop sending MJ home. You can't imagine the harm and ramifications of stopping the show. That's what Phillips says. And Phillips sits there while Dr. Murray is reading the riot act to Mr. Ortega, who's trying to help. And what does he do? He does nothing except for lie about how long the meeting was and who left and the tone of the meeting and everything. I mean, if he really cared, would he say, hey, this is what's wrong? Remember, we asked him, well, what was wrong? I don't know. He wouldn't want to know. He didn't want to know. He didn't have any insurance. And then MJ's security calls Dr. Lee. Michael's feeling hot on one side of his body, June 21st, 4 days before he died. They called Dr. Lee. Murray signs the agreement on the 24th, which Michael has never seen a copy of, nor any of his representatives. After the rehearsal, he gives them the benzodiazepines. Remember, it's the benzodiazepines and the propofol. And Murray was more interested in keeping the show going than keeping his patient alive. And then the paramedics come and they say, hey, the guy looks like he is in the last stages of disease. He looks like a hospice patient. And the first thing he asks, is there a DNR? Do not resuscitate. So Mr. Seneff is 30-some year paramedic. He doesn't know anything. He sees him. He thinks the guy's dying from a bad disease. The guy that they say is fine and can do everything. Okay? Doesn't add up. Now, let's talk about the pressure. I asked Kenny, was there pressure on everyone to make sure this got ready to go? Yes. Not just you, but Michael, the whole group. Was there pressure? Pressure is building? Yes. Time pressure. Next. AEG's lawyer said, plaintiffs try to argue that Dr. Murray did what he did because of conflict of interest, because Dr. Murray felt pressure from AEG Live to return Jackson to the stage before he was ready. It's a very clever theory. Okay? But we came up with that, right? Guess who came up with that? I didn't come up with it. It was the truth. And guess when they found out? AEG knew, but they didn't do anything about it. Orlando Martinez, the detective from the LAPD, within 2 days of Michael's death, he found the card and the contract. That's all he had. And what did he say? Well, when you saw the card and the contract, thinking at that moment, at the moment, that the crime that may have occurred was negligence, partly due to incompetence. After seeing the contract and the amount of money involved, focusing on whether for a motive, the financial aspect of it may have been important to Dr. Murray. His willingness to, disregard his Hippocratic oath for financial gain. So this is the theory that we're the clever lawyers that came up with, that the Los Angeles Police Department, who's not involved in this case, had within 2 days. And the reason it took 2 days is because they couldn't just go in Murray's car. So they had to get, a warrant, or actually, I guess it was a search warrant, even though it was a death investigation, to go in there. I mean, Detective Martinez was on it in 2 days. It's not us coming up with a clever theory. Anyone that saw the contract, and they would know, hey, wait a minute, what's this guy doing? Why are they paying him this money? Because they want to control him. Okay, this is it. I talked a little bit about it already.
About 2 years ago, we were building a new arena in London, which was in and of itself an amazing feat because there's no land there, and that was called the O2. It's the most successful arena in the history of the arena business. Why would they do all this? The goal there was to go after a handful of worldwide superstars and convince them to residence there. And Michael was at the top of the list. I mean, it's a short list. Then early September of '08, I got a call from the gentleman who I work for, and he said Michael was actually ready to come back to work and he had asked for me. So I quickly went and met with Michael at the Bel Air Hotel, and it was really then that, looking him straight in the eye, I actually realized this was not a wild goose chase.
No, I mean at that point.
About 2 years ago, we were building a new...
I'm sorry. Well, he's going to that. This is when, you notice how Mr. Phillips has no problem answering questions and talking? Very, explanatory, everything. Okay? In October, remember, Mr. Anschutz, the head of the man who wasn't here and never came, was overseeing everything. Mr. Anschutz calls Mr. Phillips and says, get on this. And he says, we wanted to go after. That was his words, go after. And then he says, we've lived his last two major tours, Mr. Gongaware. We know the history, problems, and idiosyncrasies. We will not overestimate his power and potential, and will not make mistakes that could cost him his career as the ultimate artist. We will maximize it. They had a plan.
Bel Air Hotel, and it was really then that, looking him straight in the eye, I quickly went and met with Michael at the Bel Air Hotel, and it was really then that, looking him straight in the eye, I actually realized this was not a wild goose chase, that he really was ready to go back on stage.
AEG felt that the right thing for Michael to do was to go out and play public again and kind of reclaim his throne as the greatest live entertainer of all time.
Then what happened? This is the guy they wanted, the greatest entertainer they want to make all this money with. They're telling Mr. Trell, Mr. Fifthgrade, talking about him being a freak. Then they get him to sign this contract, January 26th, the freak that he was going to meet with. He put up everything he had, guaranteed everything he had under 16.3 to do this. Goes to the press conference in March. They had to throw him in a cold shower. They slapped him, and he screamed louder. I don't know who Arthur Castle is.
When we did the press conference in London, it was the biggest press conference to announce a live entertainment project I've ever seen.
Scariest thing he's ever seen in his life. Of AEG, CEO. We played his devil, couldn't remember anything.
I love you so much. Really. From the bottom of my heart.
This is all from the
This is it. And see you in July.
Then the executive says Michael was underwhelming.
We put the
He
shows
didn't
on
get
sale.
the feel
We
he
had
could
2
do
days
it.
of pre-sales. We had the fans register on michaeljacksonlive.com, 8 o'clock in the morning when we started.
What does Mr.
It
Phillips
just
say? Now I
exploded.
have to
They
get him
went
on
as fast
stage.
as we could sell them. I guess it was
Scary.
an hour maybe that before all those tickets were gone.
This was at a stratospheric level. This was at a level that we had never seen before.
We sold 800,000 tickets in the United Kingdom.
And then he says,
one's
odds.
ever done that
I get
in an
him
arena.
through the 50
So we still have the
shows,
whole rest
and
of
he
the
says,
world,
that's why
you
the
know,
insurance
hungry and
companies
waiting.
get so rich.
When the shows actually sold out, there were still 264,000 people in the queue waiting to buy tickets, and that's enough to sell out easily another 50 shows.
Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Jackson has left the building. Well done, everyone. Well done.
So they had a plan in place, and they didn't want it derailed at all, no matter what the costs, at all costs, and now they want to avoid responsibility. And they needed Dr. Murray, and they knew that. All right. Let's talk a little bit about Michael's fault, and then I'm going to get done. So I told you that this is a case about shared responsibility since the very beginning. And I told you that, yes, Michael had been told that propofol can be dangerous. Okay? Yes, he had been told that by at least 3 people, maybe more. But he trusted doctors, and maybe he didn't make the best decisions. But when you evaluate Michael's fault, you have to evaluate it as the same or similar person under the same or similar circumstances. He was being pressured. He could lose everything he had. He wanted to do this, not only for his children, but he had financial issues, and he wanted to do it to make money for his children. And he was going to give them everything. So when you evaluate it, and I know they want to talk and blame him and, attack him, all this stuff. Okay. But let's look at the law. They claim that he was negligent, contributed to his death, but they have to prove that. That's their burden of proof. And they got to show that it was a substantial factor in cause of his death. Now, if Murray didn't give him the propofol, he wouldn't have died. Remember, counsel told you, you know what, you're going to see, we are going to show ugly stuff. Okay, so what did they show? That he got a couple shots of Demerol, that he took Demerol in the 1993 and in 2002 or so, and that doctors went to Neverland Ranch, and he was friendly, and Dr. Farshon put a device in him to try to rid him of the opiates, and that Dr. Farshon said that he did everything for his children. And they showed that he asked 3 people, I think, for propofol, and they refused to give it to him, Quinn, Lee, Metzger. And they showed that he got charged in a criminal case. They kept bringing that up. He got charged, he got charged, he got charged, all the time. Okay, he did. But what does that have to do with this trial? Why do they want to bring that out? Because they want you to not like him. And then they showed that his mom signed a letter to People magazine, and they showed that he was in a lawsuit where he didn't go to a concert, and they showed that Mr. Fournier and him had a dispute, and Mr. Fournier told him, don't go home, so he went to Kentucky Fried Chicken, and they wanted to bring that out. Why do you think? That he was eating chicken after the procedure. And then they showed that Mr. DeLeo, when he was thin, said, get him a bucket of chicken. I mean, why are they bringing all that out? And then they showed that he spent a lot of money, and that he bought things for his mom and other people, and that he donated money to hospitals, and he donated money to charities, and he did concerts for free, and he wrote songs to help people in Africa, and he wrote songs to help people. That's all the ugly. I mean, what have we seen in this case that we hadn't heard before? Where's all the ugly stuff, okay? He used Demerol. Presidents, John F. Kennedy, you heard that? He was fine. He was the president, used Demerol. But Michael wasn't having any problems until he got back into this deal with AEG. He was fine. Remember they said he was fine, he was fine, he was fine. He was great, he was excited. And then the pressure started to build, and AEG was making the contract with Murray, and Murray was pressured, and Michael was pressured, and they're meeting at his house, and they're putting Murray and Phillips in charge of everything. And he could lose everything. But AEG just wanted the show to go on. And what was Michael to do? So he didn't do the right thing maybe, but so you decide if he's negligent. And what I want to talk about here is another thing counsel said. You're going to see the evidence that shows the truth that will actually come to light that Mr. Jackson had been abusing this drug, propofol, for years, okay? Where's that evidence? Where is it? Well, what we know is they said he was. He received propofol in Germany 2 times, set up by Dr. Metzger, in an appropriate procedure, and he had no problem. And sure, it doesn't give you real sleep, but he thought it did. So sure, maybe he shouldn't have done it, but he never had a problem. And all the other times that he had propofol in the evidence is for procedures. And they're saying, well, he's a baby, he doesn't like pain. But every doctor that came in or testified on video, Quinn, I can't remember, all the doctors said that propofol was appropriate, Fournier, for the procedures that he was getting. It wasn't always that people had it, but it was appropriate. And he never said, give me propofol. They just gave him the medication. What's Kevin Garnett's name? Adams, Dr. Adams in Las Vegas, Dr. Sasaki, Dr. So many doctors. Doctor shopping. He never, no one came in and said he was going to them for the purpose of getting medication, just to like get free drugs. No one said that he used any recreational drugs, ever. No evidence of that. No evidence that he was using any drugs to get high. The only evidence is that he was using propofol for legitimate medical purposes twice in Germany, and at this time, in his desperate state, to get sleep. And boy, everybody knows what it's like to not have sleep. And imagine to be a performer and having all this pressure with no sleep. I mean, obviously he was desperate for sleep, and that's what caused the problem. But Murray is the one that gave it to him. And AEG wants to just drive by and say, hey, that's not us, man. That's not us. So Karen Fay talked to Debbie Rowe 2 times in Germany, always in a surgical suite. She was impressed what happened. Remember the letter to Metzger from the German doctor. He didn't remember everything. He didn't have a habit of using it. He respected the doctors. He would rely on the doctors. You know, hey, maybe it wasn't a good idea to rely on them. But he didn't really want meds except for pain and the recreational phenomena. And remember this, what started, I mean, there was never a problem for Michael from when he was born until the Pepsi commercial. And, you know, that nobody's talked about that. But, you know, everyone has pain for a different reason. And what started his pain was through no fault of his own. He had a horrific burn injury. He had keloid scarring. He had skin expanders. He had so many surgeries. It was so painful. And, you know, he isn't in the NFL. He doesn't have the highest pain threshold. You know, they say you're injured, you hurt. Okay? He's not a professional football player. He's not a college football player. He's a 100-and-some pound singer, entertainer, writer, humanitarian, and he didn't like pain. And everyone's different in that regard. And so, okay, maybe he was a baby, they said, but he didn't want to take the pain to get high, the medication to get high. He took it for pain. And then he had the fall in Munich. I mean, he had herniated discs. He took pain meds. Okay? So then you got to find out if it was a substantial factor, again, on that. And then you've got to do the percent. So what I've done is made like a pie. This is what I think. You may think it's less. You may think it's more. I think he's at least 20% if you find comparative negligence responsible. Because you got to look at him in the state he was in. Sure, he got involved with Murray. Sure, he knew that propofol could be dangerous. He thought Murray could do it right. It wasn't. Okay? But the rest goes on AEG. Mr. Putnam, AEG lawyer, they didn't give you any numbers. But I think that's fair. And what you got to do is you got to compare. Because remember, they hired Murray, and whether Michael chose him, selected him, his personal doctor, doesn't matter. They created the conflict. There's no conflict. We're not here. They are the ones that wanted the written contract with Murray. Michael never asked for it. They never showed it to him. So, let me... I already did that one. All right. I'm going to wind up, and I know there's going to be a million things that I wish I would have said, but it's getting close to lunchtime. Again, I want to thank everyone for all your time. I mean, it's been a long trial. And I know the sacrifices that everyone's made personally to be here on time, to be attentive. I've never seen, 7 notepads. I mean, it's unheard of. I think some may have more. But that shows the type of attentiveness that all of you had. And I want to thank you on behalf of Mrs. Jackson, Prince, Blanket, and Paris. And I know you do the right thing. Before I close, I want to tell you a little story about when I was in college. And they, that one, what was that witness? Ackerman said, you went to Fresno State. And did that. I did. I played football in college. My coach was from Montana. And he would always tell us a story before the game. Because once you're getting ready for the game and you're going to get ready for your deliberations, and I know you're going to take it serious, you're just not going to go in there and say no and leave so everybody can leave, okay? And when all the work is done and you're getting ready for the game, he reminded us of a story. It goes like this. There was a wise old man in Montana. And in Montana, there were these kids that always thought that they're going to get one over on the wise old man. And they never could succeed. So one day, a sparrow fell from a nest. And one of the boys picked it up and called all his buddies over and said, you see, I'm going to fool the wise old man. I got it. This is what we're going to do. We're going to go up there and I'm going to say, okay, wise old man. And I'm going to hold my hands out like this. And I'm going to say, is the bird dead or is the bird alive? And if he says the bird is dead, I'm going to open my hand. And if he says the bird is alive, I'm going to crush it in my hand. There's no way he's going to get one on us this time. So they go up there and they say, okay, wise old man, is the bird alive or is the bird dead? And he looks and he said, lad, the fate of the bird is in your hands. And ladies and gentlemen, the fate is in your hands, and I know you'll do the right thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go out for lunch. Come back to this room at 1:30, and I will read you some concluding instructions, maybe 4 or 5. I'm going to swear the bailiffs, and then you can start deliberation. Okay? All right, thank you. See you at 1:30.